morning. Good morning. It is April 23rd, 2024. I do say good morning as a salutation, but I do hope that you make that an intention, because when we all individually have an intention, then perhaps it may spread. That too can also be contagious, good intention can be contagious, even though some people insist on being, whatever they are. Another day. It was Earth Day yesterday, and if you are watching from the other side of the world, time zone, then it is Earth Day for you today. It's not something I have ever commemorated because I'd like to believe that it's something I personally, that's tautology, isn't it? I personally, you, I personally do commemorate every day by just I'm in wonder every day. And that is something I have kept within me from childhood. I still do look at trees, and I am a tree hugger. It's quite, literally, I am a tree hugger. I love the feel I love trees. I love connecting with that. That doesn't make me some sort of hippie. If anything, I can be quite cynical, actually, but about a lot of things. But when it comes to this planet and its beauty, I am not cynical about that. I will never ever stop being amazed and awestruck by everything from the stars twinkling at night. And there are reasons why. Do you know why stars twinkle? We talked a bit about Earth Day and how the Earth formed and usual stuff. Sitara, which is on Mondays at 5 p.m. AEST. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time. And but I don't think I mentioned why stars twinkle, and that's because we had mentioned something about the atmosphere protecting Earth from a lot of things, the cosmic rays, UV rays, etc. Why we worry about our ozone layer. And stars twinkle because of that stratosphere, because of that atmosphere and the gases, etc. And the light of those gases that are perhaps not even there. Some stars are twinkling, but they're so far away, their light is still reaching us. And that's insane. That's beautiful. I guess you could say that on Earth sometimes. People seem so far away from each other, so removed. I'm going to actually read, because the news I read is fairly, that I curate and read out is fairly heavy. So I'm going to read from some, well, they're called tabloids, I guess, but they've got interesting news articles, and this is from around Australia. But let's hear. So I don't know if news.com.au is going to appreciate being called a tabloid, but I think they are a tabloid. I think that they're owned by Fox. So once upon a time, news was not like this. News.com.au, it was actually fairly respectful, but I'm not sure. They've got some good news. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going to start with an entertainment headline. Comedian Arj Barker's request that a mother and baby leave a Melbourne show sparks debate. US comedian Arj Barker has hit back at critics who called him out for booting a breastfeeding mum and her newborn baby from his show. Look, I don't know how to feel about this. I'm going to continue reading. A breastfeeding mom who was booted out of a comedian's show because her baby girl was making noise in the crowd says the incident left her feeling humiliated. US comedian Arj Barker asked mother of three, Trish Faranda, and her 7-month-old baby to leave his Melbourne Comedy Festival show at the Athenaeum Theatre on Saturday night. The act sparked a walkout in the theatre and triggered a passionate debate online. Speaking to a radio station, Ms. Faranda insisted her baby wasn't screaming and hit back at critics who questioned why she took a kid to a 15-plus comedy show. She wasn't screaming. She was just being a baby. She gurgled a little bit. She had a bit of a whinge. Nothing loud, she said. The mother said she had intentionally booked seats with her sister and a friend near the front of the theatre, but to the side so she could make a quick exit if her bub got too noisy. If her baby got too noisy, but I am reading word for word. I didn't want to impact other people. People were out to have a good night. But Barker insisted on asking the woman to leave the theatre. 10 or 12 other people, mostly women and mothers, joined her in walking out of the theatre in solidarity. We booked, so she says that she was at another show of David Hughesy. David Hughes, who's another famous comedian in Australia, and she said that when he saw her with the baby, he did his own skit about her and his own kid, and he moved on with his show like a true professional. But Arj Barker refused to back down, insisting the baby was disrupting his performance. The show is strictly age 15 plus, as clearly stated on the ticket site. She had an infant with her. The baby was disrupting my performance. On behalf of the other 700 people who paid to see the gig, I politely told her the baby couldn't stay. She thought I was kidding, which made the exchange a bit awkward. He offered her a refund, and the theatre staff should not have seated a baby in his audience in the first place, is what he's saying. So I'm reading. He says the theatre staff should not have seated a baby in my audience in the first place. Look, I don't know how to feel about that. I think mothers already get so, it's been a really hard one case for women to be able to breastfeed in public, because when babies are hungry, they're hungry. And they demand that. That's what we do as human beings, right? When we're hungry, we have to go get food. Well, babies, the only way they can get food is through their mother. Should babies be out in things like this? I don't know. Perhaps she couldn't get a babysitter because gosh knows all that is extremely expensive to get babysitters, etc. So should people, I don't know, and apparently and perhaps it is Look, I don't want to be an apologist for especially a man, but I am and I haven't had babies, and that was a choice of mine because I brought up children, stepchildren, 5 stepchildren. So I made an absolute choice, and I talk about that in various episodes of our podcast, Radio Fly, and in Daily Egg, here, there, and everywhere. And I'll talk about that a bit more. I might leave this to the views section so Dwayne and I can have a little conversation about it. It's a very difficult conversation, and I don't know where to take this, because I am on both sides. As someone on stage, I really don't want someone in the audience. Hecklers are bad enough. Comedians get hecklers all the time, but with hecklers, it's okay. It's a tit for tat. If that heckler has decided to draw attention to themselves, I think they're fair go. And then the comedian putting themselves out there to be heckled, fair go. But a breastfeeding mother who was just going out for a night to get some time to herself, and that's the thing. It's like, well, time to yourself doesn't mean that everyone else needs to then accommodate you. Oh, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one, this one. If she was breastfeeding out in the theater, fine. But I do get that.
But you're coming from a performer's point of view.
I'm coming from a performer's point of view. But then I have performed many times, but I'm not a comedian. A comedian does, and as I know as an orator on stage, how it is to have people not paying attention to what you're saying. It does actually throw you off. But again, as a woman, I would not say to a woman, can you leave, please? I wouldn't say that. It's a very difficult situation. And in this one, I'm going to have to, oh gosh. If I side with the woman on this one, I feel like I am being disingenuous. I feel like I'm just doing that for solidarity, which I always am on the side of woman on this. But as a performer, and I do think a woman performer would not have said that, but a woman performer would still be disgruntled. But because women performers, do have to be. To a certain extent, all of us are people pleasers. So a woman performer would see that and go, okay, I'm not going to complain about that. And a woman can multitask. Males and men, I guess, have to be very tunnel vision. They can't multitask. So maybe they cannot then compartmentalize their performance side and having to then ignore something that could potentially throw them off. I mean, women have to do all of these things. Women have to breastfeed in public with all people around them either gawking or saying, oh, that's disgusting, or all sorts of shit. I've seen women say to other women, can you put that away? My children are here. And it's like, yeah, okay, so they were not breastfed. So I think I'm on the side of the woman. Having said that, I do think that she should not have taken her baby to this show. I really feel that. She wanted to go out with her mother and her sister. One or the other had to take a fall for the breastfeeding mother and look after the baby so that the mother could actually have a night out to enjoy something on her own. It's a no-win situation for anyone on this one. But women do, you know. Anyway, so I'm still continuing. These are not really news headlines. I'm just reading news articles on news.com.au. So what have we got here? Oh, this actually is horrific. Is absolutely horrific. And I'm going to warn you that if I do read further, because currently in Australia we are all still, especially in Sydney, we are all still. Everyone is, you know, very heavy under the unexpected attacks that happen in unexpected areas, particularly predominantly Eurocentric, affluent suburbs in Sydney, and have been affected by this. But all around Sydney, in 1 week, there were 5 different incidents, and males ranging from teenagers to the 40-year-old murderer, Bondi. But this is ugh. In September 1988, one teen's 9 chilling words led to the brutal rape and murder of a young woman. Now he could be freed. And they do stress that this is a very distressing article. And Aussie dad's desperate fight to keep his sister's killers in jail. Every day for the last 36 years, I'm not going to say surnames on this one, David has thought nothing but his sister. He was just a little boy when his father told him the earth-shattering news that nobody, let alone a 10-year-old child, should ever have to hear. Look, this is a very heavy story. His sister was murdered. This was in 1988. And it is one of the most horrific murders ever. So people are like, oh, not in our backyard about Bondi, except if you are a person of First Nations origin, then you know in your backyard, terrible things happen to First Nations people and have been happening for 235 years. They continue to happen. Nothing has changed other than we're all modern society now, so it's all polite. But they're still, the stolen generation is still stolen. I read out to you the news the other day about a 10-year-old committing suicide whilst in state care. How is that okay for anything, for anyone? But this young woman in 1988, Janine, it was one of the most stomach-churning murders Australia has ever known. So yes, in our backyard. It has happened in our backyard. Viciously gang raped and killed. I'm sorry, I cannot keep the emotion out of my voice. If you want impartial news, please go elsewhere. Please go to people who don't seem to care. And newsreaders should care. I understand why commercial stations and even, regardless, government-funded stations, any station free to air, they want their newsreaders to be stoic and not actually feel anything. I can't do that. I really can't do that. You need to know that this is inhumane, and I am human. Janine was viciously gang raped and killed by a pack of youth as she made her way home from work. And the 20-year-old bank teller's murder shocked the nation. The dark details of the last day of her life have haunted David for decades, her brother. But there is one thing that has kept him from spiraling, the knowledge that those he knew to be the monsters who took his sister's life are behind bars. But now that could all change. Earlier this month, lawyer and former politician Peter Breen pushed for an inquiry into one of Janine's rapists and killers, Stephen Shorty. I'm not saying the surname. The now 58-year-old was convicted in 1990 for the crime, with the judge declaring that he, along with the others directly involved, should never be released from prison. But at a recent hearing in Sydney Supreme Court, Justice Ian Harrison said that Jamieson, via his lawyer and longtime supporter Peter Breen, Peter Breen, longtime supporter of a murderer and rapist. You want to go attack someone? Go find this guy. Ask him why. Why? Why do you want to free this guy? Why? And they've sought a suite of orders and proceedings against the State Attorney General. Mr. Breen told the court that another man nicknamed Shorty was known in the area at the time and wore a bandana similar to the one found at the crime scene. It is understood that Mr. Breen is arguing DNA testing from this bandana might cast doubt over his client's convictions. Why the need to do that, Mr. Breen? Why? Angry and upset. Understandable. These recent actions have been devastating for David, who told news.com.au that he is shattered that these claims are being brought up again after all these years. I'm angry about it. Who has a voice for Janine? He's angry about it. Somebody has to be, and that person is him, he says. The sentencing judge said life recommended, never to be released, and that is exactly how it should be. David said he believes they have the right people locked up in jail where they should be. It is reading out what they did to her, and they were all deemed to have psychopathic personality traits, especially the oldest, the one who was deemed. So one was Wayne, was also present on the night Janine was raped and murdered, however, was given a lighter sentence as he did not physically participate in the crime. The 51-year-old is housed at Long Bay Correctional Complex in maximum security, so this is another one, as he was deemed a serial sex offender and served sentences for sexual assault and kidnap unrelated to Janine's case. He was incarcerated when he was 15 and has spent more than 3 decades behind bars. So he's been kept alive. So this was except for his 20-month stint in the late 1990s, during which he committed multiple violent assault and sexual offences against women. The state successfully fought in 2019 and again in 2023 to keep Wayne locked up under continuing detention orders. However, it is understood that he will now be released in just a matter of weeks. Wayne will initially be under an interim supervision order involving strict conditions, including electronic monitoring, after a decision made by New South Wales Supreme Court Justice Helen Wilson. He was deemed by the judge to have psychopathic personality traits with no concern or empathy for others and continued to deny or minimize his disturbing history of sexual offences. In a November 2023 assessment report conducted by a psychologist from the high-risk offenders team, and still, these people are being allowed out. And the exact date of their release and location of accommodation cannot be released due to an order of the court. They're being protected. And the brother is saying, I've had to live most of my life seeing these so-called boys not that much older than me do something like this, and then show so little respect and remorse only when they think they should be let out of jail. These 9 chilling words set the wheels in motion for one of Australia's worst crimes. So yes, in our backyard, they said, oh look, I can't even say it. But this is what they said in 1988, these boys ranging from 14 to 21. They said, why don't we get a Sheila and rape her? Oh. And then they murdered her in the most heinous way. The pack, which included 5 males, Matthew 16, Bronson 14, Shorty 22, Wayne 15, and 1 female, Carol 15. Oh. I'll put this article in the caption link and you can read it for yourself because I can't. But please stop saying not in our backyard when you're talking about the heinous crimes that happen in Sydney and in Australia, because crimes have been happening on this sacred land for a long, long time. And yes, even amongst the First Nations communities, I believe Alice Springs has got the highest crime rate for domestic violence, or one of the Northern Territory towns. And you can't just say, oh, look, it's all the First Nations people. We have to say it, unfortunately, that yes, it is an issue, but what is happening to them? Why don't we talk about the intergenerational trauma of First Nations people, of what the descendants have to continue to suffer? These are people, the modern day people, the colonized people, yes, they belong in these constructs built on their land. But there are still people connected to this land by way of their DNA, and they feel everything. Likewise, the First Nations people of the state of America, we don't talk about them unless, of course, Martin Scorsese is up for an Oscar for a movie he made, depicting the violence put upon them and the conniving and plots, etc., etc. So then we talk about the First Nations people of the state of America when it comes to the Euro construct and Hollywood. Whew. Oh, look, I can't. There's more articles I've got here, but I guess first thing in the morning, no one really wants to hear all this, right? So here's another article. Fears for Australian women as more die allegedly at the hands of young males. It says men, but they're not men. These males, they're not men. Man, and I say this as a woman, as a womanist, as a woman who called herself a feminist from the age of 11 to 51, but the feminism we have is a Euro construct or a Euro template and is solely for the benefit of the capitalist structures that the patriarchy have put in place. I do not call myself a feminist anymore because I consider white feminism as foot soldiers for the patriarchy. And I'm looking at you, brown and black sisters who follow that template. You are merely upholding and perpetuating it, including the women of the country of my birth. The professional feminists there who hate other women, actually. They're just misogynists masquerading as feminists, and they're also, sadly, misandrists. There's a huge problem in this. We all hate each other. Let's just face it. As people, as a species, we should just admit that we just hate each other. But that's not what we're built for. That's not what we're built with. It is the lack of love because of all the trauma that is coursing through the veins of each generation that does it to each generation. That is causing such hatred inside people that they have to either internalize and punish themselves or externalize, and that's what's actually happening to the world. People who are too weak-minded to punish their own selves and do some what they call shadow work. People are weak-minded, and that's why psychology and therapy, etc., is such a booming business. Religion and therapy, the crutches of the weak mind. I said what I said. And both religion and therapy are good things. I understand why therapy exists, and I don't condemn it, although despite the words I just said. And maybe not the weak mind, perhaps that was harsh. Perhaps that was harsh because people are lonely and people don't have people to speak with. The more people surround themselves with people, the lonelier they are. If you cannot be by yourself, you are truly a lonely person. And people can't be with themselves because they can't confront themselves. Anyway, I'm going to continue reading this article. As Australia mourns the violent deaths of another 5 women. This was an article from April 16th. A growing chorus of experts has called for our attention to shift from the actions of young girls to those of boys and young adult males. Because they're talking about this because Pikria Dacia, Yixuan Cheng, who is a foreign national, Jade Young, Dawn Singleton, and Ashley Good, and security guard, the lone male, Faraz Tahir, who was a refugee and had just started work, were murdered by Queensland male Joel Cauchi in his stabbing rampage at Westfield Bondi Junction, Bulla, on Saturday afternoon. While a motive has not been stated, police on Monday morning said it was obvious the offender had focused on women and avoided the males. The tragedy came on the heels of a vigil on Friday night for Hannah Maguire, the 3rd female to be allegedly killed by a man in the Ballarat region in as many months, amid a national crisis of violence against women that has claimed 28 lives this year, according to journalist Cheryl Moody's Australian Femicide Watch, and I will put this link in the caption. What is going on? Exactly what I have said. Exactly what I have said prior to me reading that out is what is going on. I'm going to move on to world news because Whew, this is insane. I have got to read one thing out here. So this is from April 22, still on news.com.au, and this is Texas boy 10 confesses to killing a stranger in 2022, but he can't be charged under state law. A child has confessed to sneaking into a complete stranger's trailer 2 years ago and shooting him in the head as he slept. A 10-year-old Texas boy has confessed to killing a stranger over 2 years ago, but according to state law, the alleged murderous youngster cannot be charged with the crime. The boy shared key details that have not been revealed to the public in the 2022 slaying of Brandon O'Quinn Raspberry, a case that has left authorities scratching their heads for more than 2 years. Mr. Raspberry, 32, was found in his RV on January 18, 2022, with a single gunshot wound to his head and 2 minor graze wounds on each of his hands, according to the Gonzales County Sheriff's Office. Ah, gosh. The boy, whose identity has not been revealed, described in detail in interviews with police every detail of the cold-blooded murder he allegedly carried out when he was just 7 years old. We have 10-year-olds in Australia of First Nations origin committing suicide whilst in state care. We have 7-year-old boys in Texas thinking it must be fun to pull the trigger. How do they even know how to do these things? The world needs a reset. These constructs that have been in place for centuries now cannot be washed out by our activism, by our advocacy for and on behalf of the communities and countries in this world that are being torn apart by crises and conflict. And I'm not going to say war, because that would make it seem like the things that are happening in the countries that are especially dominating our news cycles. I'm not going to say war, because this is unfair. This is unequal. But we also need to understand we cannot focus on one. Right now, what is happening in Palestine is dominating, and people are now seeing, oof. But that is not the only thing that is happening in the world. Please be aware of this. It is just that the Palestinians have now finally been given a voice, and that is why they are cracking down hard on social media. As I read out yesterday in yesterday's The Daily Egg, TikTok they're going to pass this soon in the state of America to ban it. Now, whether or not that does get passed in Senate, it has been taken there before, but it failed. But they're doing it. They're going to do it unless the Chinese founders or the Chinese co-owners bite dance, give it up. And that's all it's about. It's just about the Chinese threat. I do believe the person who co-founded is, yes, of Chinese ancestry, but a Singaporean. But they're going to ban TikTok. It's because the people who can now utilize social media to tell the world of the atrocities that are happening to them on the ground. And here I'm going to give a PSA on behalf of the Lives of Our Days. We are looking for sponsors and patrons and advertisers, because we would like to get people on the ground, but they need to be paid for the work they do. We would like to have contributors all around the world giving us news as it happens, when it happens, and the truth and transparency of it. There is no censorship here. Unlike the New York Times, which I sadly had to give up my subscription to, because they are now asking for things from their journalists, which I'm not happy about, as to not use words like genocide and horrors and atrocities. So not describe it. They have to remain impartial. Why not say genocide? What is genocide? Genocide is the killing of any people. One person should not be killed, let alone tens of thousands. We have a finite life cycle. Life takes care of it. Life takes care of other people's length and duration of life. Oh, gosh. You know, I do understand why the Daily Egg is hard viewing because news headline after news headline after news headline, it's insane. Now I'm going to go to ABC now to see what is happening in Australia. Look, it's still a, no, I'm going to, oh gosh, look, no. But they're saying companies losing money after being locked out of Facebook and Instagram. Yes, this is, I have also been in a back and forth with Meta, and Meta, you cannot actually, Meta has now become so AI, you cannot get access to a real time person. And now, of course, Meta has unveiled its AI on all its platforms, and it's a little bit scary. And we are at that junction now where AI is threatening the livelihood of many, many people, including, well, writers and graphic designers and photographers and content creators of any sort. I'm not too worried, even as we lose jobs, even as our jobs get given to computers that were programmed by humans. And let me tell you one thing, it's a very amusing article I had read out a few days ago that Amazon, or last week, Amazon supermarket, they have supermarkets in the States of America. They've got these very innovative methods of checkout in place. So when people pick items off the shelf, it supposedly gets scanned somehow, and people then get a credit card charged. A lot of people have had their credit cards charged months after the transaction. They manage to walk out and they're like, oh, okay. So apparently it's supposed to scan, right? And they've also got carts, which I think perhaps is okay, it's smarter, but come on. People, what about people? What about seeing people in jobs again? Why can't we use AI as assisting intelligence instead of artificial intelligence? Because that's what it is. Because the reason why these shoppers were getting their bills months late was because that wasn't AI. Oh yeah, it was AI, the acronym, or but it was assisting Indians, because the people, what was actually scanning the products as they were being picked off the shelves were people in India looking to see what that item was and then checking up to see the price on that day. And that takes a lot of time. I understand it's about programming and seeing consumer behavior, but they're like preempting. It's like how Hollywood does this thing where before the movie is out, they get the preview out so that they can get people, the marketing side. And by the way, the more something is marketed like that, you know that the movie is not going to be that good. But also we are at a time where even the good people, even the ones with merit, have to adopt the hustler, psychology. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's very hard as a person of merit, as an artist, even a non-creative artist, like an administrator, having to adopt that, or an organizer, having to adopt that hustler mentality. And that's because it's too full. It's too full. What's too full? The platforms of representation are too full, and they're being filled by loud people. That is what is winning the match, because it is all a competition right now. And it's all, again, comes down to psychology of the person, psychology of our society, and who we are as a species. People want attention. People are using all sorts of platforms, whether it be advocacy or, I don't know, presidential stuff. Let's go to Fiji. Let's see what's happening in Fiji. Fiji Village is where I get my news source from. Before it was the Fiji Times, but I don't know what's happening with the Fiji Times. And at one stage, it was one of the best newspapers, frankly, in the world. And I have always loved the masthead. And for me, that was very, very special to be in Fiji, reading the Fiji Times, the first newspaper printed in the world. And I took it very seriously, especially after I moved back to Fiji after living internationally. It was like, yes, this is where I'm going to get all the news of the world ahead of the world. I was a child. What do you think? I thought that we really were getting the news like in the future. Don't worry about it. So going back to Fiji Village, featured FWCC, and that's the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. Boy, they have got their work cut out for them. The FWCC encourages bystander intervention in domestic disputes by taking appropriate safety precautions. And this is because the Women's Crisis Center is greatly saddened by the tragedy of a bystander being killed at a settlement while intervening in a domestic violence incident. They say the man acted as a good citizen, but unfortunately lost his life, and they send their condolences to his family. They also encourage bystander intervention by taking appropriate safety precautions like calling the police. Okay. I feel that we should be able to rely on police. We should be able to, yes. But by now, if the police haven't lessened the crime rates in the world, by now, if we know that so many of actual individuals within the police forces around the world use their badges as credibility to hide their own criminality. If we all know that, we also know, and particularly women know, and I say this as a woman who understands and knows that there are lots of people who are good in these systems and constructs, and they then have to pledge allegiance to that construct and that system. They think that they're there for the bigger picture good, and I've met many individuals in government, in police, who are there for good, noble reasons, for the people reasons, because what is a police person and a person in government if not someone who is there to be the representation of the population? Too often, though, they are not. So, no, yes, be careful, look after yourself. But the fact that people have to intervene when an actual domestic violence incident is happening and not when they know, you know what, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I am closely associated to the tragedy, to the atrocity that is named domestic violence. As a child, I was witness to it. But anyway, let's continue. And I had talked about the 42 villages identified to relocate due to climate change, because that side of the world is sinking rapidly. The islands that were of volcanic origin, well, you know. And as we said in Sitara, which is our show about everything celestial, that is astronomy, astrology, theology, and Earth. And today, for those of you on that side of the time zone, it's Earth Day on April 22nd. And what does that mean to you as an individual? What does that mean to you? Do you think you own this earth, or do you understand that we are merely physical manifestations of the elements? And how the earth formed was gravitational pull, and that is how we are formed too. In the womb, it is the cell. It is the cell inside the woman that is a magnet to the sperm. The sperm doesn't win a competition. They don't know where to go. They just know whee! And it's the cell that actually sends out frequencies to say, over here, we're over here, I'm over here. Gravity is within us all. So let's see what else is happening in Fiji. Nursing Association, my apologies, President the Nursing Association President, my apologies. I do cold read all the news headlines, and sometimes I cold read without having practiced the names. I am very pedantic about pronunciation of names, in particular Kaiviti names. And this is a throwback to when I used to read the news in Fiji in the early 90s, and I would practice pronouncing the names. So I'm not going to the Nursing Association President, who is a doctor, to appear on Fiji Village. No, that's not a headline. My apologies. 64% very concerned on the security of their personal and financial information when using digital financial services. 47% of consumers surveyed use digital finance services on a weekly basis, because we are all being forced into this. When Dwayne and I lived in Fiji, and we will be sharing a wonderful story about that, please do join us when we launch the slideshow, which is our travel show. It's an old-fashioned way of doing things, but it's going to be all just photographs And we lived in Fiji for a few months in 2022, and we experienced firsthand some of the very conflicting ways in a land still quite tied to its traditions, but it is a tropopolitan, and I have said this many a time. Fiji is a land of dichotomy and also a fusion of traditional and modern, and just culture and society. It's fascinating, but unfortunately, it's also a very much a small group of islands, an archipelago. Is it? Yes. Of big personalities and big egos. You can have a big personality with a humble ego, and you can have big personalities with egos that threaten to, well, drown everything out. Look, Fiji Village News, it's interesting. It's not, the news headlines today seems to be a slow news day. There's no such thing as a slow news day, because is the world at peace? Is the world everywhere at peace? I'm just going to read out a few more news headlines from, and I don't really know what's happening to this. I'm just going to go back to Fiji, and this was from Radio New Zealand. I didn't see it anywhere on Fiji newspapers, but there was from the 16th of April, and I had read this out. There was call for justice after suspected murder of an LGBTQI plus community member in Fiji. Suspected murder of a 19-year-old gender diverse person in Fiji. This person was allegedly tortured and murdered after being taken from outside her home. We are either really, really now tipping the balance to the perfect evil that the world, I feel, and we talked about this in Sitara last night. I don't know why I had mentioned Sitara, about Earth Day, sure, about how the Earth formed and how human beings form. And I talked about something, perfect evil. And I feel evolution happens regardless of what state the world is in. It is up to the human beings, who then are the ones who create the balance of good and neutrality. But from neutrality is where evil comes. Apathy, complacency, neutrality, fence sitting is from where the evil comes. And also, the good people do contribute to the rise of evil, not just by being fence sitters or apathetic, but also by, I'm going to say a very contentious thing here, by the activism that people seem to need so that they don't have to confront themselves. Look, I'm going to go into Studio K now, join Dwayne, and see what's happening on that side. So join us, and as I said yesterday, I will find a better way to segue. Right now, I'm just forcing you to look at what, oops, not that. God, that'll be clickbait. So join me as we segue to Studio K. And if this was a commercial television station, we would have ads to show you, but we don't, so I'm just going to keep babbling. Look, I couldn't read much of the news today, darling.
That bad, huh?
That bad. It is that bad. I can't do it. I understand why it is very hard going to be here to, it's, but I do.
It's not the show that's doom and gloom, it's the news.
Yes, I know that people say, oh, it's all just doom and gloom. Well, there's all the other shows that we don't talk about doom and gloom. But if you want to talk about life, you can't segregate. You have to talk about the good and the bad. You've got to talk about the doom and gloom and the glimmers of hope and beauty. There is so much to be grateful and thankful for. Excuse me while I clear my throat. I love doing that. Oh, and seeing as we were on, we were talking about Earth Day still, and we just had Sitara last night, This beanie is from one of my favorite places to be, and Dwayne has been there as well, and he loves it as well, at parks in New South Wales. The Dish, which is the CSIRO radio telescope that actually listens to what's going on out there, and was instrumental in relaying and connecting all the, I don't know, however, the waves of,
Telephone.
it's a big telephone, and that's why it was used in the supposed moon landing, the lunar landing. Look, I'm really cynical about it, and now, but I have always firmly believed that it happened.
Yeah.
I was just like, of course it happened. Of course Neil Armstrong stepped foot onto the moon. One step for man, one huge step for mankind, or something like that. And there's all sorts of things, urban myths about what else he said. I'm like, but we really should perhaps talk about
on what he didn't say.
Yes, and what he didn't say was interviews. He didn't do interviews. Buzz Aldrin, however, did a lot. We will talk about this on Sitara, so please do tune in to that, because as I said, it's everything celestial, and that is astronomy, astrology, theology, and everything to do with Earth in that regard, because Earth is just hanging in space like that. All of us hanging in space because of the gravitational pull of everything else. What does that mean? It means we all rely on each other, quite literally. What else is there to talk about today, darling? The news has depressed me. Gosh, no wonder, it's like, it is hard going. And perhaps I shouldn't lead with such heavy news, but don't be an emu. Emus don't even do that, and it's my favorite thing to say. Emus don't even put their head in the sand. They only do that just to check the eggs they put there. So they do it for a reason, to check the facts. They don't do it to hide from anything or anyone. Why do humans do it? Humans don't hide from them they don't hide from themselves internally either. They hide from themselves externally. I say them. I guess we should acknowledge that we're human too. But as I said last night on Sitara, I really do think, well, there's a lot of people who like to believe we're from other stars, but they do it in such a way that it becomes a bit like, for fuck's sake, instead of factual. And that these are the people who, make everything esoteric, or make everything woo-woo, they call it in Australia, because Australians, especially Euro Australians like to think that they're very pragmatic and practical and cynical, which they are. They had to be. Their ancestors, who were the invader settlers, well, look, it's not their fault that they were brought here, but when they came here, you think that majority would have had some sort of compassion for the people they were displacing. But I think they were not intelligent enough to understand that this is what was actually happening. They were told perhaps that the natives of this land that the empire has commandeered to be their own, and we're going to colonize this place in the name of the Queen, and it is therefore going to be called Little England, and we're going to send our convicts there because, oh my God, they're stinking up the land. That they, as the Germanic descendants, took over. Everyone was lied to, but the truth is really out there. And frankly, the truth is also out back. So, I suppose you should tune in this Saturday. When is the slideshow? This Thursday? This Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday.
Well, I do know our roster. Well, this week we're launching the slideshow. You would have seen its teaser, where we are out back. This was in 2021, was the last time we were out back. We haven't been able to go since then. But itching to go back out, and this is it's tales of our adventures out back in 2021, done the old-fashioned way. So the truth is out back, and there's lots of information about what actually happened during the settling of this country, and it's very, very much, it was a group effort. The First Nations people of this land, we call Australia, did help the people who came to this country to call it Australia. Did actually help. Because do you really believe these British people had the skills to go and discover everything by themselves? in their woolens and their wigs? Do you really think they were able to actually? I'm just confused.
If you're not careful, Australia will kill you.
Well, Australia is a lethal country, and that's what makes it so magnificent. And this is, it's not a land of monsters. They're just little spiders that could, fell you in one just.
Oh, spiders.
And drop bears. Let's not forget drop bears. Oh dear. I do resent this ideology that without colonization, a country would not have progressed. What is progress? Whose idea of progress? Whose idea of civilization? Every culture that has been colonized had civilization of its own. And I do admire, I do agree, but why couldn't it have been integration? Why the need to enter a country with full intent to harm the citizens of that country or the people, the original inhabitants of that country? Why? Why not just go and say, hey, we come in peace, we really hate where we're living because it's cold and it stinks. Can we come to your beautiful land and we'll share with you, and can you teach us your ways? And we'll teach you the things we know. Why not, right?
That sounds nice.
And the snakes of Australia, little monsters. By the way, earlier on I was talking about platforms that do good for the world. Well, Fiji Runway, based in California, is a wonderful bridge between what is happening in Fiji and the Pacific and this region and that region. Stay tuned for news coming up. We will be sharing more of that and doing specials on Starlander as well. Talk more about Fiji Runway and all the wonderful things they're doing. It is more about cultural tourism and
breaking as well. They're moving to Napa this year.
Yes, Fiji Runway is holding their event in Napa this year. It's always the organizers of Fiji Runway like to keep things fresh, so there's something new every year. So there's something very exciting to look forward to. I really, really loved what they did last year as well. It was an old-fashioned. Like a very famous Battle of Versailles, and this happened in France, of course, and it was a battle between European designers and American designers, and it was magnificent. And there's very little information out about it, but I will be talking more about that on Starlander because I do know quite a bit about it, and it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. Anyway, so this year's Fiji Runway has got exciting things happen. Stay tuned to their social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook, and they have a newsletter that is full of informative articles about not just about Fiji, but what is happening all over the world. Quite a wonderful curation of fashion news from around the world. And so also please do catch up on what's happening in Starlander. That Starlander is on Sundays at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Episode 2, I talked about 5 of my favorite vintage pieces. Please note that I don't say my 5 favorite vintage pieces. Or did I just say that? Or did I say 5 of my, yes I did, 5 of my favorite vintage pieces, because it is impossible for me to choose just 5. Like what? No way, not in my wardrobe. Not in my wardrobe. But I did share a bit of history. Of course, it is Fashion Revolution Week, and Fashion Revolution Week was started in 2013 as a result of the disaster that befell the people in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, at the Rana Plaza on April 24th, 2013. And it sent shockwaves through the world. Like, who did you think was making your clothes? At one stage, Fiji was a manufacturing hub for big names. But of course, Fiji got too expensive because, we had to raise the, minimum wage from $1 Fijian to about $2 Fijian. And, things don't get cheaper. Anyway, so all these people who were manufacturing in Fiji then pulled out because what is everything about? Profit. Why are things expensive? Profit. Why are things not changing? Profit. We need to enter a no-profit era. We really do. In order to get equality, from that equality then comes equity, because equity is based on merit. Everybody should start off with equality. We should all have the ability to move forward struggle-free. But anyway, As I was saying, Fashion Revolution Week, you have to ask who made your clothes. Ask the people you purchase your clothes from who made your clothes. Fiji is very much ahead in many, many ways in ethical practices and sustainability. And this is also what Fiji Runway highlights, not just cultural tourism. That Fiji is, more than just sun, sand, and sea. Yes, it's all of that. And yes, it is a hospitality darling. Unfortunately, it is very different from the demographic that it used to be known for in the 70s and 80s, especially, and in the 90s. It was very much a luxury destination. It wasn't just a destination for people who want to be treated like royalty, particularly from the Euro constructs, from the Euro streams, who go to Fiji not knowing the wealth of culture that is in that country, the tropopolitan society that has creativity dripping off every tree, every luscious branch in Fiji. There is so much to know. Cultural tourism, they could, and we have talked about this, have a wonderful market for cannabis tourism. Of course, regulated highly, but imagine if people go into Fiji just to have a bit of a break and be chilled about it. I mean, if cannabis has been legalized the world over and now seen for the medicine it has always been. But as I said yesterday, everything needs to be regulated, so I also believe that not everybody should be doing such things. I do state this because yesterday I also read a news headline about Pakistan now entering the medical cannabis industry, which is great. Because if people do need soothing and escapism, the escapism bit is a bit of a worry. I don't think that these things should be applied for escapist reasons. I think people who want to partake of things like alcohol and that which we call drugs should have psychological testing. Not every person is geared for that, is able to handle the expansion of the mind that what these... what's another word for drugs? I don't like the stigma associated with drugs, I'm a bit of a square. I've not done any of those hard drugs, and that's fine with me. I don't need to because I feel like I have an internal, that happen anyway. I don't need escapism, but I am against the policing of people, of adults. And the more you make something taboo, the more a younger adult wants to do it out of some sort of rebellion based on societal demands upon them. Children, and I mean every person up to the age of 25, should not be doing anything, should not be drinking alcohol, should not be doing anything drugs-wise. Not at all. Our brains are still forming. Fine. What we should be allowed to do after the age of 25, maybe around 26, give a buffer zone from 25 to 26. I don't know if all brains work the same, but certainly all our brains continue forming till we are about 25. And then, as children, we start damaging those brain cells that are trying to find out what that individual, as in each one of us, is going to be. But there you go. We stunt ourselves before we have a chance to fully spread our wings. But I do think that there is a lot of benefit in countries examining things like that, not exploiting. People are looking for escapism because way too many people are running from themselves. And I guess, the turmoil in here, is really bad. So people then look for escapism and go and search it in alcohol and alcohol is an enjoyable, fun thing to do. We don't drink a lot now, but we absolutely understand the art of it all, the science and art of alcohol, especially wine. We do understand. I think it's all rather genius of the human brain to understand that from that plant comes this fruit that when it goes a little bit off or ferments, it makes those birds a little bit dizzy. What will it do for me? I mean, isn't it amazing what human beings have been able to do? But again, everything gets destroyed because of how everything gets exploited. It's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. But as I was saying about Fiji, they perhaps do need to look into that. I know that there have been something said by the current government, maybe, that is something that is a potential thing. Because tourism itself, I'm not just talking about cannabis tourism, like say Thailand has adopted. From news accounts, I understand Thailand is retracting their progressiveness, and they had actually had made cannabis legal to be sold. And by the way, we do in Fiji. There's kava shops all over the place, and kava is now also sold as a medicine worldwide because the root, the kava root, has got soporific, where it soothes and it calms a person, and that's what. And there's kava bars all over, which I find amusing, and it's not a social thing to do. But anyway, it keeps everyone very calm. And I do love though when the Kaiviti, and that is the indigenous person of Fiji, I feel that when they drink it, they get reconnected to the land, and it's an interesting thing to watch. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you very much for being here for today's The Daily Egg. We will continue talking about all the things we talk about, but right now it is time for The Daily Egg. Thank you very much for being here. We will see you, nothing on today, but tomorrow we'll be back with The Daily Egg. Please do catch up on the rest of our shows. As I said, Stylender and The Riff, episode 2 of both shows are up. And what do we talk about in The Riff? Theme songs and just everything from here, there, and everywhere, as I usually do. I love that you can keep up with me on this one, darling, because it's just like, I'm like, chung, 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 chung. But that's okay. And in Stylender, I talk about the history of these garments that I'm wearing. They're all made in Australia. Australia had an incredible manufacturing industry at one stage from World War II till about 70s, and the demise of it happened really like in the noughties. But people in Australia have been struggling since the 70s to keep the manufacturing in Australia. Anyway, I do share that information on Stylender. Do catch up, otherwise we'll see you tomorrow morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time at 7 o'clock. Thank you. Bye.
Hit the subscribe button.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We deeply appreciate it. It doesn't cost you anything. It is priceless to us. We deeply appreciate it. It's valuable. Thank you. Bye.